Hi, this is Hiki with the Samba podcast. Well, this week we're going to speak about Samba, football or soccer, depending in which country you're in, and hippies. Now, how do we get this together? Okay, let's begin with the hippie bit. So, in the early 1970s, it was a good time to be young, to be alive. If you were not a political militant or if you're not involved in politics, because Brazil was under a harsh dictatorship, people were being arrested, exiled, killed, tortured. But parallel to this, there was this very lively hippie moment. There was the economical miracle, the milagre econômico. Brazil was growing at a rate of 10%, 12% every year for several years. So the moment was very good. People had money in their pockets and you could drop out. And they were everywhere, guys with long hair. As people couldn't express themselves politically, they decided just to leave society. And it was a very intense time. Not only in Brazil, throughout the world. Woodstock was just around the corner, backwards. There were super bands going on at their prime, like the Rolling Stones, Beatles had just finished. And there was Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, there had been Jimi Hendrix. And there was that holy triad that everybody speaks about: drugs, sex, and rock and roll. People were exploring things, and the terrain was open. You know, a lot of things that we take for granted these days, those days were unexplored, you know, not only geographically, but, you know, mentally and existentially. Now we'll speak about football. In 1970, there was three times world champion, but that time it was like a super victory. And you can easily say that in those days, Brazil was the land of football. Everybody played football. Everybody had grown up playing football. So in this period, a group of hippies came up in the music scene. And it was a proper group. They lived together in a community. They came from Bahia, the Novos Baianos. We're still going to speak a lot about them. Of course, as everybody else, they had been children, they all played football, but they not only saw themselves as a band, they took themselves seriously as a football team because there were so many people, you know, the aggregate, sound technicians were, they together made a team of football and they actually competed. They were not great. They're better musicians than football players, but they took themselves seriously as a team. I won't speak more about them in another podcast, but I'll just give you a spoiler. They were trained or they were mentored by João Gilberto, who's like the biggest star of bossa nova. They are one of my favorite bands of all times and of all countries. They are one of my favorite bands. And the song I'm going to play today is iconic of this mixture of samba, football, and hippieism or psychedelia, or however you want to call it. Many of them came from the interior of Bahia, from little towns, and there weren't clubs or things. That people just played football on the street. So the story of this song is about boys playing football on the street. Ball goes, breaks a lady's window, and she gets upset. She punctures the ball, and but it talks about the energy that they're feeling and how libertarian it is to play football. And it ends with, for me, a very iconic sentence of for the time. And boy will change life for the ball, or will exchange the ball for a life. This will only happen if he isn't Brazilian at that moment. Football was about having fun. Being a hippie was about having fun. Um, all the libertarian things, the drugs, the sex, the rock and roll, and the samba. Samba also, it must be said, it kind of left the favelas with all the football craziness and everything. It left the favelas. It became popular within the middle class. It wasn't uncommon for you to see batucadas or people doing percussion in the streets in the more affluent parts of town, people of the middle class, white people, just doing a batucada, and this translated into their music. The samba there's quite authentic, although there weren't any sambistas, properly from the morro, as you say. Morro is hills, so morro favela is more or less the same thing. Anyway, this is a song that I'm going to play, and I hope you like it. Couldn't end this podcast without talking about the famous football matches at Chico Buarque de Holanda's house. Now, Chico Buarque de Holanda we spoke about in the last podcast. He's, for me, the most respectable figure and consistent figure in Brazilian popular music. Very left-wing, but also at the same time from a very traditional family. As I said, the closest as you can come to Brazilian aristocracy. He was already wealthy before becoming a star. After he became a star, he really had a lot of money, despite being left-wing. There you go. But one thing has nothing to do with the other. You can have money and be left-wing. You can have no money and be right-wing, which you see quite a lot nowadays. Anyways, I'm not sure if he bought a field or he built a field in his house. Anyway, he has a field. I think he's already stopped. He's already in his mid-70s, reaching his 80s, must have already stopped. But it was a place where everybody went to play football. Everybody. All the artists who knew how to play football were invited there. And notorious figures, Bob Marley, when he went to Brazil, went to play football in Chico Buarque's house. Ex-football players also played there. Even the current president, Lula, played there several times. His ministers, judges of the Supreme Court, well, not when they were in the Supreme Court, but his lawyer at the time who went to became part of the Supreme Court. Apparently he plays football very well. Zanin, He also played football there, and a lot of important figures played football in Shipbuaki's house. You could even say Olympus, right? Playing football there. It's a big honor to play there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this podcast, and I hope to see you next week. Okay, take care. Bye.